Let us first welcome you all by a dance performance directed by Dr. Arpadev Bhattacharya. His Niharika Center for Performing Arts will now offer you a dance recital.
তুমি কি এমনি শক্তিমান বিধির বাঁধন কাটবে তুমি এমন শক্তিমান তুমি কি এমনি শক্তিমান আমাদের ভাঙা গড়া তোমার হাতে এমন অভিমান তোমাদের এমনি অভিমান বিধির বাঁধন কাটবে তুমি এমন শক্তিমান তুমি কি এমনি শক্তিমান চিরদিন টানবে পিছে চিরদিন রাখবে নিচে চিরদিন টানবে পিছে চিরদিন রাখবে নিচে এত বলে নাই রে তোমার সইবে না সেটা বিধির বাঁধন কাটবে তুমি বিধির বাঁধন কাটবে তুমি এমন শাসনে যতই ঘের আছে বল দুর্বলেরও শাসনে যতই ঘের আছে বল দুর্বলেরও না যতই বড় না যতই বড় আছে ভগবান আমাদের শক্তি মেরে তোরাও বাঁচবি রে আমাদের শক্তি মেরে তোরাও বাঁচবি রে বোঝা তোর ভারী হলে বোঝা তোর ভারী হলে ডুববে তোরই ঘর বিধির বাঁধন কাটবে তুমি আমাদের ভাঙা গড়া তোমার হাতে এমন অভিমান তোমাদের
messenger of peace and enduring love, to accept an invitation from such a small civil society organization like ours. There were only two answers: divine will. Sri Aurobindo reminds us that all can be done if the God touch is there. Second, the acknowledgement of the beauty of smallness. Reverend, your presence along with those in the audience bear testimony to the magnificence of the human spirit to connect and interrelate values and sentiments which are fast eroding, leading to a decline in human contact and social connections. Reverend, may the spark of reverence for life, of which you are a symbol, illuminate the light within us. May we be possessed with a sense of love and service to others that is self-effacing, not one that is self-seeking. We bow in reverence.
We'll have a traditional Indian welcome for Reverend Jackson by Mrs. Jayasri Sherpa, who will apply the Mangal Tika. The Uttariya will be presented to him by Mr. Saurav Mukherjee. Mrs. Sitapa Bose, Junior School Coordinator, Young Horizon School, will present a floral tribute to Reverend Jackson.
Let me express my thanks for this opportunity to come and to get all these flowers which I can't take back home. It is such a joy to be back in India again. I was here in Delhi about 2 years ago, honoring the 50th anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, and then later the Nehru election. We'll talk a bit more with our panel, but of all the things that Attorney Gandhi did, that Mahatma Gandhi single-handedly showed us how you can bring off a revolution without guns and reciprocal bloodshed. That idea of self-determination has been unleashed on the world. The whole world is virtually free since that movement led by the people of India. Today we're free but not equal. Our work is not done. The whole world has changed because of this place. There's something holy about India, something divine about this place, and I appreciate it very much. I do want to say that when I think about his efforts and sacrifice and religious fervor, bringing off our gunless revolution, Mother Teresa put her hard print on poverty, which is the way we measure our character, how we treat the least of these. When I saw the invitation, I could not help but say yes. It's a long ways from Calcutta to Chicago, and yet in many ways, it's not so very far away. We speak sometimes different languages, but the same message. We're measured by how we treat the least of these. So this has been a joyous 2 days so far. It's been kind of like a weekend, 2 days, and I have 3 more days to go. Be right back in just a moment. Thank you very much.
we welcome Dr. Santosh Mehrotra, Member, Planning Commission and Director General, Institute of Applied Manpower Research. Young Horizons School will present a floral tribute, and Mrs. Jayasri Sherpa, the Mangal Tika. Mr. Saurabh Mukherjee will present the Uttariyo to Dr. Mehrotra.
Thank you very much, Saurabh. Thank you. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, what an honor it is to be sharing the podium with none other than the Revd Jesse Jackson, who I've heard speak so many times in the United States. The disciple of Martin Luther King, a disciple of Mahatma Gandhi, and a mentor of President Obama. Thank you, Saurabh, for inviting me to this. You've asked me to speak about how we can illumine the light within among the millions of children of our country. What I'm going to do in the next 15 minutes is present to you the facts, whether the light is shining among our children. Present the bad news first, present some good news in about 3 or 4 minutes, and then go on to tell you about what we believe needs to be done very rapidly if we are to realize the demographic dividend that we keep talking about. What we do know about our education system is that, like the education system in the United States, it is a highly unequal and an unequalizing education system. Just the fact that I'm speaking to you in English, a language which is sort of understood perhaps by no more than 10 or 15% of the population itself, is just one dimension of this unequalness. But more importantly, and that's what's going to be the main focus of my talk, is the fact that our education system for the last 65 years since independence has been biased against elementary education, and it has been biased towards higher education. And those of us who are sitting in this room are beneficiaries of this. And the United States is a major beneficiary of this, which is the reason why the latest CEO of Microsoft is Satya Nadella, who had most of his education in India. So the result of this bias against elementary education has led to the following 3 sets of facts. First, we now have a stock of 310 million people who are illiterate, according to Census 2011, which is 26% of the country's population after 67 years of the country's independence. The total population of the country in 1947, when we became independent, was only around 325 million. And one of the main reasons why illiterates are as many as there are still is because our system was biased against elementary education, and school access was very limited for about 40 years. The tragedy is, that's the stock situation. What about the flow? The tragedy is that those who have been going to school, who are going to school, their learning levels are very low, particularly in government schools. So the Pratham surveys, the ASAR surveys that we all know, tell us that children who are in class 5 only half of those children are able to read class 2 texts. The result is that children and parents are voting with their feet, that today children are not wanting to go to government schools, and only scheduled caste, scheduled tribe children are actually mainly in government schools. And they are migrating to private schools. Not very good news. That's not the way the most advanced economies of the world built up ensured universal schooling. It was government-led schooling that ensured throughout the world, in the successful developing countries as well as in the rich countries. It was government-led schooling which universalized schooling. And finally, only 20% of our workforce of 470 million has any vocational or education or training, formal or informal. So combined all these facts, the state of illiteracy, the fact that children are not learning, the fact that our vocational education is very narrowly based, has resulted in a situation where workers' productivity is low and hence incomes are low, which is the reason poverty incidence remains as high as 22%. Poverty has been declining, but it remains very low, very, very high, at a very low poverty line. But there is good news. What is the good news? 97% of all our children of the relevant age cohort are now in a primary school. They're attending. Midday meals is a very important reason. But as I said, and there is a sting with every good news, as I said, learning levels of these children are very low. The second good news is that there is now gender parity which has been achieved at the primary level, primary meaning classes 1 to 5. Girls are continuing into upper primary level. They are even continuing into secondary level, because girls are being given by state governments bicycles to enable them to ride to the schools. But, and that's the sting in the tail, once they sort of complete secondary school, will they get any non-agricultural job? Because they're not going to be working in agriculture. And in our country, the female labor force participation rate has been declining. It is one of the lowest in the world and declining. And finally, despite the fact that the government has recognized that vocational education is very important, vocational education is still very limited and very little of it has happened. So what can be done? What can be done to, as Revd Jesse Jackson said in St. Paul Cathedral earlier this evening, to keep hope alive? And what should not be done? I'll say a few things about that, 6 or 7 things. First, people tell us, let us hire more teachers. Well, state governments have hired a very large number of teachers. Pupil-teacher ratios have fallen. And they have fallen because teachers have been hired on a permanent basis. But there is no change in teacher absence. You know, there was a study done by the World Bank in a representative sample across the whole country. 2003, it said 26% of our teachers don't turn up for work. I'm sure the numbers are even higher in West Bengal. In 2011, the same surveys, the same villages were visited. Still 23% of our teachers are not attending school. So what is the policy implication? The policy implication, ladies and gentlemen, is as follows. We need to hire not permanent teachers, we need to hire contract workers, contract teachers. They can be hired at lower salaries, they are more motivated to work, they actually appear at school and teach. You will be able to hire local teachers if you hire workers, teachers on contract. You will be able to hire these girls who are going to secondary school and completing secondary school, because these girls will need jobs. In addition, remedial teaching needs to be introduced by these contract teachers, by these female teachers, for children who are remaining in school and not learning very much. The evidence is, almost every sentence that I speak here is based on research evidence, because that's my job as head of the Research Institute of the Planning Commission. The research evidence is that teacher qualifications or training matter less. What matters much more is teacher effort. Second, there's another panacea that is held out. Technology-aided instruction. Should we be using technology-aided? It's very fancy, it's very sexy, but it's also very expensive. There are expensive models of 1 laptop per child. There are also less expensive models using the radio. So one is very expensive, the other is not very effective, the radio. So the evidence is that technology requires a high initial level of learning in order to be effective. But I've just been telling you that the evidence is that initial levels of learning are very low. So we shouldn't be, state governments should not be attracted to technology-aided. Third, what we do know is that if you improve the monitoring of teachers, top-down monitoring of teachers, it does actually work. Regular inspection is 10 times more cost-effective than hiring additional teachers. So what's needed is much more top-down inspection. And it's even better than the hope that we live in, that school management committees or parent-teacher meetings are going to be very, very significant in impacting learning or impacting teacher presence. That's not the evidence. It might be the evidence that PTAs are very important in the private schools, which might be represented in this room, but that's not the evidence in government schools. Fourth, there's need for and there is evidence for performance-linked pay, partial performance-linked pay. Paying teachers on the basis of the number of days they attend work. Paying teachers on the number of days, on the basis of the number of days they attend work. Group incentives don't work. To teachers, what is much more effective is individual incentives. Fifth, the right to education has said there should be automatic promotion. Not a good idea. What it does is to put at a discount learning outcomes. And because automatic promotion is taking place, children are simply moving through the grades without necessarily learning, and that's what the evidence is showing. So make learning outcomes an explicit goal of primary education and elementary school policy. And there are ways to do it. I don't have the time to develop this. Sixth, all these children who are moving into upper primary and graduating into secondary schools, they need to continue into vocational education. Half of all Chinese children who complete compulsory 9 years of education, half are in vocational schools. That is why China is the manufacturing hub of the world. It's a manufacturing powerhouse. If India wants to become a manufacturing powerhouse of Asia and the world, it needs to ensure that vocational education is not introduced in classes 11 and 12. It is introduced in class 9 across the whole country as rapidly as possible, which is what we have recommended in our National Vocational Education Qualification Framework. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, this is my last point. I began by saying this country has 310 million illiterate people. It's absolutely critical that new methods need to be used, much more effective method needs to be used to ensure basic adult literacy and numeracy. Adults need to learn to read only 500 words or so, and it is possible to do that very rapidly using methods that are now available. And finally, there are millions of adults in the workforce who are semi-literate, semi-numerate, but they have enormous and fantastic skills, traditional skills. It's important that our school system builds a mechanism for recognizing this prior learning for all these people. Without these 6 or 7 things, ladies and gentlemen, the light within children will never be lit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mehrotra. Now we welcome Mr. Jawahar Sarkar, CEO, Prasar Bharati, on stage. The floral tribute will be presented by Mrs. Meena Mukherjee, Coordinator, Theatre Road Branch, Young Horizons School, and the Mangal Tika by Mrs. Jayashree Sherpa.
Revd Jackson, Excellency JJ, of the United States of America, Dr. Revd Mukherjee, I forgot Saurabh is in the corner, Saurabh and friends. Dr. Mehrotra gave a very powerful statistics-packed indictment of our system and the way forward. I would like to take a more commonplace approach. I was counting about 39 years with the governmental systems, and I would claim some amount of acquaintance of how it works, the carrots, the sticks, or what have you, the absence. Now, we have seen it all in the last 30 years, and I thought of starting with these words, but I'll end with that sloka of Sanskrit. We have, as we stand before you today, a prospect which is now bandied around as a demographic dividend. Whether it's a dividend or a liability would depend on us many of us who are sitting here today. What is this dividend? We have managed to get a population of 1.29 billion, second largest in the world, and we are poised to cross China as the world's largest population exactly 14 years from today. Now, what does 14 years mean? Do you remember the 1st of January 2000? I'm sure you do. Everyone does. That's 14 years ago. It sounds like yesterday. It looks like yesterday. So tomorrow when we stand up, tomorrow 14 years from today, we'll be crossing China as the world's most populous country. If you look back at statistics now, 66% of our population, Dr. Mehrotra, 66% of our population is now below 35. That makes us one of the world's largest youth populations. 14 years from today, I guess it will be something like 73, 72, 73. 3 out of every 4 persons, or maybe plus minus, would be categorized as young. This is the dividend because the rest of the world is aging. It is this dividend that we are talking about. This is the one we spoke about. Now I'll put it in blunt facts. Number one, we have, as I said, as Dr. Mehrotra said, 73% of our population is literate. I don't put total emphasis only on literacy. Literacy is just a way of reading words. Education, in my humble opinion, would consist of A, literacy, B, an appropriate knowledge, and third would be making sense out of it all. If you take each one at a time, you see that while 73% are literate in the technical sense of the term, the 27% that's illiterate doesn't stop watching movies. They can understand every word, they can't read or write it, if I've got it correct. Now, while we are placing emphasis on reading and writing, which we should go on hammering this point, I would submit that it's equally important to move on to the second one, that is injecting appropriate knowledge. Now, we are a country where we have had a lot of historical pluses and a lot of historical minuses. We were one of the first to accept the UNESCO's Dakar framework, which sort of is like the Millennium Development Goal of 2000. We accepted it, and we still fight for it. I mean, we still believe very strongly in all the goals that have been set out in Dakar. I actually represented India at UNESCO for about 3.5 years, so we're familiar with the floor debates. As things go on, and then we went in for a series of steps. But the one that actually clicked would give you the hang of where the key lies. The one that first clicked was a political statement. It was a free midday meal in a southern state of India. How do you get kids to school? So it's just common sense arithmetic that they had to go and work for that meal. If you gave it free to them, they were coming and attending a school. This is the origin of the midday meal school, midday meal program, which is now one of the cornerstones of India's getting the kids to school program. We have along with that Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, we have a lot of things. We in fact put, I think, a cess of 3% on all taxes to generate the necessary resources. As we get them into school, can we retain them? I'm afraid not. The dropout rate ranges between 40 to 48%, so they have to go back. We now got to find the second solution of how to keep that back. And it's going to be as innovative, as constructive, as, let's say, unorthodox as the first one. That is where the key lies in getting them. I represent a public broadcaster, which is about 500 TV and radio stations, all of them not the best, but well, we are there everywhere. We started a scheme, but then it got dropped out somewhere down the line. It's called Same Language Subtitling. I don't know, some people got irritated, annoyed to see that. When we put up Hindi film songs, which are a staple fare of attraction, staple attraction, you also ran the script below in Hindi, emphasizing, highlighting the word, the particular alphabet as you wrote along, so that you were clear that this came with a choti e and that comes with a badi e. This comes with an a matra and that doesn't come with an a. Even the simple things that people like us forget were brought in through what we call the same language subtitling. This was not an act of genius, it was not rocket science, it was just a plain act of constructive thinking. What it meant was literacy in the sense of recognizing your alphabets, literacy in the sense of knowing how the words are formed, could be passed on. If you can't get them to school, well, there are other methods to get them to understand each and every alphabet. I'm just underlining a point, I'm not here to give you the solution. Along with that comes certain other developments which go beyond the schoolroom and classroom. You see, when I was again part in Delhi, a part of the team that broke down the Berlin Wall, that's in 1991, permit control systems. That moment, there was a lot of resistance in the bureaucracy. There is resistance for everything in the bureaucracy, so we can relax on that score. Having said that, the forces that we unleashed led to the present situation where you have today 900 million mobile handsets. 900 million mobile handsets in a time of recession. The moment it's lifted, it's going to cross the population. In other words, 1.25 billion, 1.32 billion is going to cross it. Which means that every second person, every third person, a 2 out of 3, 3 out of 3 would be having a mobile handset. But there are different ways of reaching a man other than our entire banking system has started relying now on the mobile handset. Education, I would submit, is not only a knowledge of letters, which is absolutely, of course, essential, the bare minimum, but it would also mean imbibing a lot of appropriate knowledge. And that is where I draw your attention. We have systems here, which when compared to the United States, stand out in stark contrast. We have learning by rote, mug it up, cram it up, they don't. We have maths drilled into from class, I don't know, class 2 maybe, sir? Maths? Arithmetic. Which class do you start? Maybe, huh? Class 1. Class 1, 2 into 2 makes 4, 4 into 4, 2 makes 8, and it goes on. So maths is drilled in, and this one gets into your system. And then we can go up all the way up to 16 into 16, just like that. So I had this this amusing experience when in America, this Radio Shack thing, she conked out. The girl said, just got to keep waiting until my computer surfaces. I said, look, baby, this is what I bought and this is what it is. He gave me a hum-haw and started clipping her nails. So I was there, standing in the line. And she made a pencil scrawl of what I said. When the lights came on and she did the calculations, she looked back and said, gosh, you're a genius. I said, no, I'm just an Indian. So what I mean is the way we were brought up is this is a plus point by forcing it on. But then when you remember the way this learning by rote or cramming it all in, tables and arithmetic and maths and what have you, which country of the world has which little... I saw a 5-year-old or 6-year-old kid come on TV recently who could rattle off every capital. I don't know where he got it from. Anyway, so coming back, this is just the knowledge part of it. But where life matters is as the life of Revd Jesse Jackson, as the life of Martin Luther King, the life of any person who has sort of striven to rise above the limitations with which he was born, is how to make the best use of it. That is what education liberates. It's not a system of only learning words that's required. not only cramming in a lot of knowledge, that too is required, but the application of it. And that can come only in an ambient society, in an atmosphere that generates much more than you must become an MBA or must become an IIT at any cost. We look upon kids as our future walking on two legs. We look upon kids as mobile sources of investment. We look upon kids as living our dreams, the ones that we never could get it. We look upon kids as exportable commodities, getting back dollars for us. Somewhere down the line, we have all collectively made this mistake. And we now are the largest producer of cheaply produced brain power for the rest of the world. But where we come, and not only that, what hurts me more than that is many of these brains come back, especially in winter when it's rather cold, and flood us with so many prescriptions of what's wrong about the Indian state, the Indian government, the Indian system, especially in winter. I would submit that if you are patriotic enough, please suffer the system like we do. I know a particular kid who comes from MIT with another lady, and so Rudrangshu's best friends. Now they come back and give us prescriptions of what's wrong. Now giving prescriptions on a dollar-backed tenure post is fair enough. It's up to a point. But the only solution lies in staying within the system and trying to find out what went wrong. I give two small examples of how innovation can work. One I mentioned was the midday meal system that got kids back. I also mentioned the same language subtitling. The subtitling or the scripting, the script rolling, scrolling the script on the bottom of TV screens, which could be made almost mandatory. If nothing else, when you're enjoying, you might like to look at the letters. You might like to look at alphabets. With these words, as I said, I have come here to get across my thoughts and also to tell my kids that I was there with Revd Jesse Jackson. Revd Jackson, are you here? Yes, that's it. I would leave you at this stage. I do support what Dr. Mehrotra has also mentioned about skill training and vocational, but there's not enough time for it. The last, it's a Sanskrit sloka, a Sanskrit saying would say, Ya Vidya Sa Vimuttaya. Education liberates. Thank you very much.
I take the opportunity of welcoming on stage Dr. Rudrangshu Mukherjee, eminent historian and author, who taught at Presidency College, but unfortunately I never had the good fortune of being taught by him. But about more than a decade back, I had the good fortune of working with him in the Telegraph. He is the editor of the editorial section of the Telegraph. Please give him a warm welcome. Mrs. Nandita Pal, Coordinator, Senior School, Young Horizons School, Kadai Road Branch, offer a floral tribute, and the Mangal Tika will be given by Mrs. Jayashree Sherpa.
Revd Jesse Jackson, ladies and gentlemen, I promise you I'm the last of the starters. The main course will come very soon, and I hope I will not stand between you and that splendid repast that is to come when Revd Jesse Jackson speaks this evening. Education liberates is somewhat of a self-evident truth. Of course it does. Does it liberate in India? That is the question that we have to face, ladies and gentlemen, this evening. 1930, Rabindranath Tagore wrote, in my view, the imposing tower of misery which today rests on the heart of India has its sole foundation in the absence of education. The sole foundation in the absence of education. 8 decades later, if we just change one word instead of absence, if we just say neglect, the statement remains valid. That's the reality. Despite the statistics that come to us from bureaucrats from Delhi, education is a rare commodity in India. Yet, it is the most needed commodity. It's the thing that is required most if India is to be truly free, if India is to be truly liberated. And I mean education. I'm not going to harp on literacy figures. How is literacy defined in India? The ability to sign your name. That is not education. Education is the ability to think for yourself. Education is the ability to open up your minds to new ideas. Education is the ability to communicate, to know how to cope with the world, to know what's going on. A famous schoolmaster in England, when he used to meet his students, he used to say, "What do you want from me? Do you want me to cram you for a first, or do you want me to open up your minds?" This is what is lacking. People can sign their names, 73%, 83%, I don't care what the figures are. But are these people who can think for themselves? Are these people who are masters of their own destiny through their education, through their ability to think for themselves? That's the question we have to think about. We have schools, government-run schools in this country, schools that have no blackboard, schools that have no chalk, schools in which teachers play truant. We heard just now that there is gender parity up to class 5. Why isn't there any gender parity after class 5? A study in Uttar Pradesh discovered that girl students who had attained puberty didn't have bathrooms where they needed to go for their basic hygiene. That's why they stopped coming to school. Is the attraction of a midday meal, a carrot, enough to draw students to be educated? That's the question we have to ask ourselves. That's the question that the government and the bureaucracy doesn't ask themselves. They think files in statistics in files and planning commission figures are enough. They are not. Because there is a wider reality of which more and more people are becoming aware. And this is where people like you and me, who have had all the privileges that life can offer in India, have something to do, something to contribute. This is where a school like Young Horizons, the endeavor of somebody like Sister Cyril in Loreto Cialda, is worth remembering, because they want to give back something to society in return for the privileges that society gave to them, in the form of educating the underprivileged of this society. Sister Cyril teaches street children who spend their days and nights on the streets, or used to, till she drew them under her fold. The Young Horizons School attempts to do the same thing. There are other enterprises like this all over India. That's where the hope lies. The hope doesn't lie in staying with the system. The system has failed us. The system has failed us for nearly 70 years. Let us think a little differently. Let us think of how actually education can liberate, how education can give content to the word freedom. Thank you.
Now we'll have a felicitation of Mr. Bert Lobe, Director, Mennonite Central Committee. I request Mr. Lobe and Revd Jesse Jackson to come up on stage. Revd Jackson felicitates Mr. Albert C. Lobe. Please give a big hand. A gentleman steeped in Christian and humanitarian values, who started his journey in Canada, whose academic and social activities span 5 decades and 2 diverse continents. That is Mr. Albert C. Lobe, an active member of the Mennonite Church who has offered invaluable service to the cause of the poor in India across communities. He has given us the opportunity to honor him. On this day, Young Men's Welfare Society felicitates Mr. Albert C. Lobe, former headmaster, consultant, and an ever-youthful social activist. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. And now, we'll have for what we have been waiting for we don't know how many days or months. When I was in school, a young whippersnapper, we heard of somebody called Revd Jesse Jackson contesting the presidential elections. Now, it's like a miracle, it's like a dream that today I'm standing on the same stage with Revd Jackson. It does not matter whether he won that election or he didn't. What matters is, as per his own words, hold on and hold out because you have the talent. Revd Jackson, Kolkata welcomes you.
Dr. Moore, come here for a minute, please. I'm glad that Gandhi was successful in Abraham Lincoln, because if Abraham Lincoln and Gandhi had not been successful, I would be enslaved by this man today. I'm being driven by a slave master. Come on, let people see how a real slave master looks. Come on here. Let people see you. Let people see how I've been working non-stop. This is how a real slave master looks. Give him a big hand. Let me express, on the most sincere note, my passion and concern for education. And the first question really is a moral question. Do you think our children deserve to learn? That's not a unanimous answer of yes. In the olden times, only the king and the king's children and the court got an education. The feeling that they were the only ones who would have education that needed it because they had to manage, they had to govern. So it's commonplace to have massive illiteracy, and ignorance became a form of control. Those who knew could control those who did not know. So there are those who still believe that just a few should have an education. There's another Nebuchadnezzar theory. When he felt the ghetto uprising, he told his eunuch to go out to the ghetto and get 3 boys who were knowledgeable in wisdom and science, had no blemish in their character, no jail records, they could score well on tests, and bring 3 of them into the king's house. The name was Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, so the names became. And when he brought them into the king's house, he gave them, for 3 years, meals from the king's table. They drank the king's wine. They were exposed to the king's cultural options. They were riding polo and playing cricket. They were in the king's household. And after 3 years, they did very well. Then Nebuchadnezzar promoted them. Those who go to church, that kind of comes out as, and they wouldn't go in the fire furnace. That's not the real issue. The issue is that the king reached into the same dark ghetto where it said the kids can't read, can't write, and gave those 3 boys an infrastructure. Give them food and medicine, wine, culture, art, music, and prepared them, and they did well. The question is not, can a few of our children do well under optimum conditions? The issue is, what about the rest of them, is the moral question. What about those who didn't get optimum conditions? When we looked at the big soccer match, you were playing the opposition team. You win the game, you wear the crown. You lose the game, you don't lose your dignity. But what about losing still preserves your dignity, and winning gives you a modest celebration? On the playing field, the playing field is even. That's a prerequisite. The playing field is even. Rules are public, goals are clear, the referee is fair, the score is transparent. You don't get any points based upon inheritance. You don't lose any points based upon having been untouchable. The playing field is even. Rules are public, goals are clear. Do all of our children deserve a first-class education? Well, the first investment is an even playing field, because God alone distributes gifts, and He distributes gifts all over town. No one knows who might have in their mind the cure for cancer, or the cure for HIV/AIDS, or some way to bring about closing the gap between warring factions and bring about peace. Is it popular? Is a given idea popular? Does it make us feel a sense of esteem? Does it make us feel satisfied? Is it popular? And all of us have some sense about ourselves, want to be respected and accepted. So is it popular? Vanity asks, is it popular? Politics asks, will it win? Can I get away with it? And conscience and morality asks, is it right? If a given proposition, it may be popular or politic, but if it's not morally right, it cannot stand the test of times. Leaving children out does not stand the test of times. In America, in slavery time, for 246 years, it was illegal to teach a black kid to read or write. If a slave master raped the woman, she was his property. If he beat the man, it was his property. If he punished him by some heinous means, it was his property. If he got taught teaching a slave how to read or write, he could be punished. They knew strong minds break strong chains. Keep them ignorant and control them. Keep them ignorant and control them. Then 100 years of legal separation, legal apartheid education, where you have 2 sets of rules. One kid has the high ground, and one has the hole. The one the high ground scores high, the low ground scores low. Nothing wrong with the kids, something wrong with the grounds. Like a cookie cutter. Same dough, and one dough, and one configuration is the elephant, Another configuration is a rabbit. It's not that there's really a rabbit, it just looks that way because the cookie cutter. There's nothing wrong with our children. An even playing field will not solve. This country is #1 in technology in the world. And you do not import people from other countries to make it that. This country is #2 in the world on all the production, moving toward becoming #1 in the world. India is peopling the brain trust of Britain and the US. Head of Microsoft, Indian American. The doctors, the lawyers, the judges, peopling America and peopling Britain and peopling Europe, peopling France. Somehow the brain drain must be challenged in a way where even a honeybee, now there are no honeybees with brains, they tell me. Tell me that honeybee doesn't have a brain. The honeybee gets the nectar from a flower. It doesn't just fly away, say, I got mine, got yours. Even the honeybee, without a brain, drops nectar where it picks up pollen. And then it flies away. It feeds the flower that it robs. Those who eat, who get the nectar from India must drop some pollen in India. That's the law of reciprocity. There must be some commitment for remittance and reinvestment of time and money. India also has the most billionaires. To have the most billionaires be #1 in high tech and the most poverty does not go hand in hand. And lastly, in America, what made the real difference for us, after all of the efforts and the heroes who get against the odds, Lyndon Johnson came in. Dr. King gave the Dream speech, August 28, 1963. Kennedy was killed November the 22nd. Johnson on January the 8th, 4 months after the Dream speech, his speech to Congress was a war on poverty. He said children cannot learn if their parents are poor and unemployed. They cannot learn if there is no base at home that connects with the school. Parents should take their children to school, meet their children's teachers, exchange home numbers, turn TV off, pick up the child's report card, take their child to worship service once a week for character development. Unemployed parents often don't do that. Illiterate parents often don't do that, but they ought to have that connection. So Johnson put up something called food stamps. Food stamps help the farmer, give the farmer a market, give the trucker a load, give the store a product, and for the child, breakfast programs and lunch programs, and sometimes after school programs. That's the only meals they had, was coming to school to get a meal. They did not have a meal at home. Children who are malnourished do not do well in school. The weapon of mass destruction is poverty. Poverty kills. Poverty weakens the spirit. Poverty lowers the dream level. Poverty weakens the body, saps the spirit, and cripples the mind. And then you don't dream. And so somehow you cannot separate. Education cannot be the malady of the culture in an oasis in the middle of a desert of neglect. There simply are too many children whose parents are in poverty, whose dreams are poverty-stricken dreams. And therefore this issue of poverty is a big deal. Well, what do we do about it? Well, in 1955 or 6 or something like that, the Russians set up Sputnik. And all of a sudden, I was in the South at that time. The Russians have Sputnik. They have the most science. They can shoot us with a shotgun from the moon or something. The Russians have Sputnik up. Our response was not to try to shoot the Russian missile down, develop something called the Education Defense Act. Now, all the time, educators have been asking for more resources to educate children. They couldn't get it. They put it in the ribbon of Education Defense Act. If you go to school for science, you get a science scholarship. Even teachers who were teaching music and physical education, they went back to summer school in science courses, free ride. In 5 years, we caught Russia surpassed Russian science, but we made education a national security imperative. And in that, poverty breeds fear and ignorance and terror. A way to fight terror is with education. and we increase productivity with education. You simply not having the same country, these brains that become number one in high tech on the one hand, on the other hand, assume that children of India cannot learn. This may be the only country. Oil is the Persian Gulf's gift to the world, at least at this stage. And then others, it's lumber. Others, it may be minerals or diamonds, as from Africa. But the net export of brains from India is the number one in the world. The number one business people in Britain are Indian. Increasingly so in France. By far, that's true in America today. So there's no brain deficit disorder here in India. There is some need to see the cost of letting children remain illiterate and the value of making them literate. The cost of letting them remain illiterate and the value of making them literate becomes a big challenge. I would urge us, don't give up on the dream of educating every child, but also children's education, affordable food, drinkable water, medical care, and a Wi-Fi at their house too. You can't just have it in the school. The school-home connection must be a rather definite connection. So I would challenge us to convene religious leaders. They have a role to play in this. The major private sector beneficiaries of India's culture strive for excellence by high standards, and have a major national security summit issue, because the country is growing too fast and too great people. India has the largest democracy. It's number 2 in auto production. It has the most billionaires. But man, what about that, the begging on the corner with the cups out? India cannot afford the burden of being seen as a beggar nation. You can't be a blessed nation and be a beggar nation at the same time. And you might not beg, but your neighbors do. And if your room is clean and well kept and the house is on fire, your room can't be preserved in the first place. We live in one house called the India house. And right now, the best of your minds are jumping out the window, going to other countries, taking the best skills, having got the inspiration and motivation from this country. I would make the case last that our children deserve to learn. They can learn. It must be a priority of a different degree than it has been in the past. You put 1 seed, 2 seeds in the ground of equal strength, and you put a wall between them, and you water both of them. You cut away the weeds. In due season, one will be stronger and taller with multiples of fruit. The other will be short and stunted. The taller one was not a better one. The shorter one was not a lesser one. So long as the wall was up, there's something called photosynthesis. The one that had the sunlight grew. The one that had the shadows did not grow. All of our children deserve the sunshine. And we deserve to be in a nation where our children become so literate they can become productive. Why can't there be vocational education in virtually every school? Start, what's the first job? First job can be clean up your neighborhood. That is to say, build houses. Learn how to paint. Learn how to build infrastructure. That's the way for the future for this country is building more rail, more highway, more houses, more hospitals, more, that'll be jobs for the foreseeable future. Between reconstruction of where you live and high tech, India has the need for workers. And they must be coming out, you cannot be importing workers from other countries to come and rebuild houses and roads and bridges and sewers. The jobs, the need for the jobs are here. And they're real jobs, they're not makeshift jobs. They're jobs you can put, they got to learn how to use their hands and their heads at the same time and coordinate them to make things happen. The last is a matter of faith. I remember in terms of deciding about teachers not coming to school, that touched me deeply. I remember when I first went to school, I heard my parents saying, I must have been 5 years old, make sure you go to school, you better behave, you won't sit down and you won't behave because you went to school next, you got to learn how to sit down. Yes, Mama, I sit down. Across my house, about 2 miles, you could see it was a nice brick schoolhouse with green grass and flowers and merry-go-rounds and sliding boards. I was excited. Even though I read past, I was in my own mind, I can't wait to get there next year. On the other side of town, about 4 miles away, we went to church. There was a school with no grass on on the sidewalk where kids slid down the sidewalk and their shoes and messed up their soles near our church. The morning we came out the house, I can see it right now. As I stepped down that step, kind of moving toward the schools I had been seeing, my mama pulled me around this way. She was taking me to a school that had absolutely no appeal, no attraction, no grass, no flowers, no sliding board, no merry-go-round, the stuff the children do. Now, not only did we go to the school that had the least attractive, it was overcrowded, so we went double shifts. Some at 8 to 12, some at 12, 13 to 4. And so you take children with the least supported home and take them to the least attractive school, and you get the least productivity. It just stands to reason. There's nothing wrong with our children. There's something wrong with the cookie cutter. We have not made education. If we're going to compete, do we just need to have more missiles that we're not going to fire and can't fire? Or do we in fact have a commitment to take these children as a national security issue? And I remember my mother taking me to that school, and she told Mrs. Robertson, she said, now, Jess is all right sometime, but he might get out of hand. He can't sit down sometime. But you use the strap, which is a kind of liberty she gave Ms. Robertson, which she didn't, but she gave her that option. And I remember when my mother couldn't make it to the parents' meeting because she was working 3 jobs, Mrs. Robinson would come, they'd meet at church on Sunday because it was the same neighborhood church. That was a big factor in that first and second year. We've been learning arithmetic and subtraction and addition. And I remember saying something like that, but we can do 3 times 3, that's 9, 2 times 2 is 4. We were doing pretty good. I said, man, that's nothing. So next year you're going to have decimals and fractions. Now, who would you care about? Anybody can say 3 plus 3 is 6 and 2 plus 2 is 4. And each one of those, I have a glass of water. Half a glass of water. Everybody got that. And so we walked to Mrs. Pitt's class, Marxist teachers. And we all did poorly on the exam. There were red marks all over our papers that weekend. And we could not, she was a kind of stern looking teacher. We thought she was going to give us hell that Monday morning. We got there and she was smiling. We had to know something was wrong with her smiling. She never did smile. We walked in the room and on the desk were 2 apples. I can see them now. There was a $1 bill. There was 4 quarters, some dimes, nickels, and pennies. With the fruit on the table and the money, she had our attention. And she said, now, what is this? I said, dime. How many of these make a half $1? 5? How many quarters take make $1? She assumed that she didn't teach right. She took us into our culture. As opposed to dismissing us and even making us feel bad, she came into the language that we understood. Dimes, nickels, pennies, and quarters. And we did well. That's how you get fractions, 10% off, 20% off, 25% off. She would not teach down to us. Mrs. Pitts would not teach down to us. Lastly, Mrs. Shelton, the meanest teacher I ever saw. She was a mean little lady. My family moved to the other side of town, but we could not choose our teacher for the 6th grade. And at the lower end of the school, there were 2 6th grade classes, and then there were 2 8th grade classes. And so we walked in there, and we had been in the 5th year before Mrs. Shelton came in. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Make us set up diaphragm. We'd never heard the term diaphragm before. Set up erect. We set up erect diaphragm. And she started writing on the board these big words. We thought that she thought we were the 8th grade because she was the big words. But 6 words, she said, I know what grade this is. I've taught her before. These are no longer big words. These are polysyllabic terms. And this is a dictionary, and this is a Revd thesaurus. I'm not going to teach down you. One of you little brats might run for governor or president one day. I don't want to be embarrassed. I will never teach down you. And she kept writing big words, and we kept understanding what big words meant. The teacher, always she's present, and after she stopped by our house. Because she cared. People care that you know. They must know that you care. That's why coaches can call boys all kind of names. Because even when he's acting foolish, they know that the coach cares. People need to know, they care that you know, they know that you care. And so Mrs. Shelton, we went through a year of that rigid stuff. Set up the diaphragm and use it, learn to use the big words. And that summer I came home, I was so glad to get up for class, I did not know what to do. I thought I saw her car in front of our house. I had no idea why she was over in the projects where we were living. And I ran the house right fast. I said, hello, Mama, I ran upstairs. She said, come right back. Miss Sheldon is here. I said, Miss Sheldon, I'm glad to see you. I was lying, I did not ever want to see Miss Sheldon again. And she said, last year in my class, there were too many excused absences and too many fire drills, so I didn't finish my syllabus. So I asked Mrs. Mark, could I take my class to the 7th grade? My mama said, I've already signed you up. I had to be with Mrs. Shelton for 2 years. A teacher who cared, above and beyond the pay, a teacher who cared. When she retired in around 1980, I ran for president in 1984. She was a retired teacher who ran on my ticket and became the first black female senator in South Carolina in 100 years. The teacher who would not teach down to me became the senator on my ticket 20 years later. Parents, engage with that child and that teacher. Children are not automatically attracted to that environment. Parents, take your child to school. With your child's teachers, exchange home numbers. Government, provide for those children the necessary facilities. It must be a matter of law that they have, whether it's computers or whatever it is. And then there are enough rich folk in this country, enough rich corporations. Every child in this country should have a computer. We don't make that impossible. Repeat, say every child. Repeat, every child. Repeat, somebody, every child. In India should have a computer in their home. Every child in India who wants to learn should have a computer in their school, connected to the computer at school, and should have access to vocational education to build where they live. So our children, repeat, our children can learn, will learn, must learn. Our children can learn, will learn, must learn. If you have a size 10 foot and a size 8 shoe, you got some corns coming on your feet. Don't assume something's wrong with your foot and cut it off. Make the shoe bigger. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend Jackson. Thank you all for making this evening a success. We will have yet another session by Reverend Jackson on Wednesday, the 26th, here at the same place where we are today. We wish that many of you, if not all of you, will once again come and grace the occasion. Thank you so much. Good night. Good evening, Dr. Kunal Sarkar, and good evening, everybody in the audience. Today is the third and final day of Mr. Jackson's trip here in Kolkata and his involvement with Young Horizons and other related institutions. I also extend a warm welcome to our chairman, sir, Mr. Saurav Mukherjee. Good evening, sir. The Lord has blessed Young Horizon in many ways, and the latest blessing has come in the form of Revd Jackson. We consider it an honor and privilege to have him here amongst us. We wish him a long and happy life, and may he continue to speak not only for the oppressed millions in America, but the world over. I request our principal, Mrs. Shormishta Sen, to give her welcome address.
Good evening. We are gathered here this evening to celebrate Young Horizons' 40 years of educational service to the city. When Young Horizon was founded, we embarked on the vision that education liberates. Having a vision and carrying out that vision are both vital to the survival of any organization. 40 years later, we still stand true to that belief and work together as a team dedicated to the mission of offering education to each and every child in our schools. It is a constant endeavor to reach out to as many children as we can, especially those who are less privileged and from the marginalized section of the society. Our mission is not only to provide our schools and our students with quality education, but also enable them to become good human beings and worthy citizens. We are honored to have with us Revd Jesse Jackson, who has graciously accepted to be a part of the 40th year celebration of Young Horizons School. Revd Jackson, a disciple of Martin Luther King, is a renowned civil rights leader. He advocates peace, gender equality, economic and social justice on minorities and on women's rights. Revd Jackson is a Baptist minister who learned from his parents to trust in God and put everything in prayers. He firmly believes that with God, nothing is truly impossible. Reverend, we are truly privileged by your presence here with us. Your presence not only is an inspiration for all of us at Young Horizons School, but also will go a long way to keep our hope alive. I extend a very warm welcome to Dr. Kunal Sarkar, renowned cardiac surgeon of Kolkata, for accepting our invitation and agreeing to address this august gathering. Thank you.
I request Dr. Kunal Sarkar to come up on stage. Mrs. Dean, the senior-most teacher of Young Horizons School at present, has honored him with a floral tribute. Dr. Sarkar is the senior vice chairman and consultant cardiac surgeon at Medica Super Specialty Hospital, Kolkata. I request him to say a few words.
Most respected Revd Jackson, my dear friend Saurav, all our acquaintances, teachers and students of Young Horizon. I had to make a pledge before I entered the hall, and the pledge would be that I'm not carrying my knife with me, and I've stuck to that. You know, we belong to a different kind of species who have had the privilege to live through this country of ours. And whilst I was following the speeches, the realizations of Revd Jackson in the press over the last few days, perhaps the most pertinent and the most poignant of all his remarks has been when he's pointed out the paradigm difference between growth and equality, between wealth and distribution that is there in our society. Obviously, this is a fact of life that we need to remind ourselves over and over again. Having had the privilege of going through a Jesuit education for about a dozen years of our educational growth, as students very often we used to ask our teachers that, Reverend Father, why has God made the past of our country so glorious and the present so questionable? Again, we used to be reassured that times are changing and things are going to be better. I was reflecting on the title of today's symposium, Education Liberates. How true. We have managed to educate our sons and daughters, our young men and women. And perhaps the challenge before you, me, before the educators like Shourab and his colleagues in Young Horizon is now to transform quantitative education into qualitative education. That we just cannot be looking at a pandemic of numbers. We need to have quality, a quality which is going to form the intellectual equity of our country for the decades and centuries ahead. Well, being a poor doctor, I'm not very financially enlightened or empowered. But I always considered that the true wealth of a country like United States does not really lie in Wall Street, does not really lie in the commercial stock market exchanges. But the true wealth of a country like United States is securely kept in the intellectual vaults of Harvard, Yale, and all the schools and colleges. Because a country which has inculcated the ability to respect and nurture its intellect, to foster education in the young men and women, has truly empowered itself for centuries and decades to come. Being involved in the healthcare sector for more than 3 decades right now, we also have to live through these contradictions. In India today, we boast of ourselves. We have excelled in specialties like the heart, the brain. We are treating patients from the United States, from the Middle East, from Europe, and whatnot. But the question remains, have we been able to reach out effectively to that young boy, to that young girl who's suffering from untreated diarrhea from the doorsteps of where we live? Has the excellence, has the commercial flourish of our trade translated itself in enhancing the fundamental quality of life for the people who are less financially privileged? I think all of us will have to bear a measure of guilt in our hearts. And if we have walked a little path, we have to remind ourselves there is a long way to cover. Before the Reverend and Shourab arrived, I was listening to your experience from the health camp you conducted not so long ago with the doctors from Netherlands. What a great experience. And I have no hesitation in pledging our support to carry the program forwards. Is there anything that we could do to keep up such approach to society? I think we have to. One of the great Indian thinkers of the modern world, some of you must have read him, called Gurcharan Das, made a telling comment. He said, India grows at night. What did he mean? He meant that there were some societies, there were some countries in the world which grew because of governance. In India, we have made it a habit to grow in spite of governance. In a few months' time, you and I will have a chance in the electorate to voice our thoughts, to have an opportunity in a very democratic franchise to make it known to the governors of our nation as what are the definitions of an India that you and I aspire for. And I'm sure each one of us will do that. In spite of all our difficulties, in spite of all the problems that this country of ours has been through for a good part of 6.5 decades of independence, let us not forget that in this 6.5 decade, on the midnight of 15th of August 1947, from the words of Jawaharlal Nehru, when India woke to freedom, the literacy rate of this great country of ours stood at somewhere between 9 and 11%. So 1947, India had a literacy rate of under 15%. Today, we have bridged 73 to 74%. So in spite of all odds, a fair distance has been covered. On that particular midnight of 1947, the average Indian was expected to live no more than 52 years. Today, as per the last census, the life expectancy of an average Indian has gone into the 73rd year. So it's not all gloom and doom by any chance. We have a lot to learn. In the words of Frost, the woods may be long, the darkness may be daunting, but the challenge and the fire to meet up to it remains. And it is the personalities, the beacon of hope that is in the world today, in people like Revd Jackson, who will inspire us to achieve where we want to end up to. We are grateful in this city of ours, Reverend, for the time you have spared to be with us. No matter where you are, we continue to track your ideas, your sayings, your writings. And it is indeed privilege to sit next to a person who was one of the closest aides of the great Martin Luther King. And like the great man himself, a humble person like us would like to end and say that we all, in our own way, also have a dream. Thank you. Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you, Dr. Sharkar. That was edifying and illuminating. It is a happy coincidence that the film 12 Years a Slave has released in our city at a time when Revd Jackson has visited the city. The film brings out the horrors of slavery. What you read may not often be communicated to you, but what you watch, based on a true account, hits you and hits you hard. In the film, in a small role played by Brad Pitt, the character tells the slave owner, played by Michael Fassbender, if I'm not mistaken, what ain't right for the white man ain't right for the black man. I hope I got my accent correct. Revd Jesse Jackson, credited with the Rainbow Coalition, also believes that what is right for one is right for all, and therein lies his credit, therein lies his charm, therein lies the truth, the ideals and the principles for which he stands. We have not seen Rosa Parks, we have not seen Martin Luther King, but we know what was started by Abraham Lincoln has in a way reached its culmination in Barack Obama. For all this and more, the person we can see, the person we can touch, the person with whom we are honored to share the stage and this auditorium, Revd Jesse Jackson, is here. Please welcome him on stage. Sir, we request you to come up on stage. Our principal, ma'am, Mrs. Sen, honors Revd Jackson with the floral tribute.
Thank you for such a kind and generous introduction for these days of work and challenge and learning. Dr. Mukherjee, the chairman of Young Horizons, please stand, Mr. Chairman. Give the chairman a big hand. Would you please stand, sir? Put your hands together. For the staff of Young Horizons, staff, please stand. Staff, please stand. You've done such a marvelous. Staff, please stand. For Young Horizons, please stand. A real big hand for them. Be seated. Understand there's seminarians here. Seminarians. Seminarians, please stand. Seminarians, students. Are you guys in the dark? Come closer. Come down. We've been blessed across the years to travel much of the globe to be a part of the challenges and changes of our time. Now, I submit to you today, Doctor, that there are changeless values in changing times. Some values that we appropriate do not change with fads. They matter. Another is that we speak of this school. When we were in slavery for 246 years, 246, it was illegal to learn to read and write. If a slave master raped a woman, she was his property. If a slave escaped the plantation, he could be called back. The Supreme Court ruled blacks have no rights, whites are bound to respect. If he lynched the black man as an act of terror to intimidate the rest of those who remained alive to work, if he beat and scorned and or sold a child, it was his right to do so. All of those abuses. But if he were caught teaching a slave to read or write, he could be punished. Even then, the depths of slavery was clear that strong minds break strong chains. You should lift a nation by its morals and by its minds. In some sense, that is the great gift of India, is its minds. I've said over and over again this week, as we survey the global community today, India is exporting what they call the brain drain, great minds. The intellectual infrastructure of Britain today is India. The entrepreneurial infrastructure led by Indian leaders. The Silicon Valley in the U.S. is Indian leaders. The massive amount of doctors and scientists in the U.S. are increasingly Indian. The head of Citigroup Bank, Pandit in New York, Wall Street, Indian. The God has endowed you with good minds, and with those blessings come a great obligation to use those minds. In these last few days, as we've traveled out in the countryside with Young Horizons, as we've traveled into the various places by day and by night, I was impressed with the Nataji visit, Mr. Bose, the role he played in the liberation. We focused so much on the role that Mr. Gandhi played, a magnificent role, but it was a combination of Nataji Bose and Gandhi. It was the Indian Liberation Army. It had a big role in that. Just as in the case of South Africa, we focus so much on Mr. Mandela in his 90th year to 95 when he died. Mr. Mandela's a kind of old and feeble gentleman who forgave white oppressors. The fact of the matter is, he was the commander of the military wing of the ANC. He spoke of forgiveness after repentance and contrition and freedom. While on free, he spoke of sanctions, use economic leverage to bring that system down. So we see in some sense a rehearsal of these movements, because much of the struggle to liberate India was born in Durban, South Africa. And there's a great kinship between the role of Gandhi in Durban, South Africa, and the role of Gandhi and Netaji working together here liberating India, and how much it inspired Dr. King and freedom movements around the world. Gandhi proved in some sense that you could basically have revolutions without massive weapons if you change your mind. We look back upon that season of struggle, or the independence struggles led by Gandhi and Netaji, the independence struggles led by Dr. King, led by Nelson Mandela at that time. What does that put us today? You cannot fight their wars because they won. What is the unfinished business? We are free now. We are free from British colonialism. We are free from American official legal racism. We were not free from poverty. We're not free from illiteracy. We're not free from disease. We have much of our budget preparing to shoot an enemy's airplanes down, or shoot an enemy's anti-aircraft missiles. And yet the real threat to us is not that we might be hit by a missile, but we will be hit by the war on poverty. It is, in fact, when poverty is a war, is a weapon of mass destruction. It destroys minds. It leaves them limited. It destroys bodies. It saps spirits. It lowers our dreams. It lowers our capacity to be developing, contributing human beings. In some sense, that's what Young Horizons means to me. Without using the tough language, this is a revolutionary movement. Young Horizons creates revolutionaries because those whose minds expand have demanding expectations of a society. So I want to thank you today for the work you put into. I've watched your schools and how our eyes light up with a certain brightness, because there's now a belief that something can happen. If your mind changes, you can be in the hole and see the mountaintop. If your mind changes, if it's enlightened. There's this story about John on the Isle of Patmos. He was put up there to die, left alone in isolation, left with the scorpions, and no friends and no food. And yet, even in the depths of his aloneness, in his isolation, he had a vision. I see a new heaven and a new earth, and the old one has passed away. Once one has the capacity to think and act upon those thoughts, there's no limit to what one can do. And so I've been impressed by that. I was impressed by going by Mother Teresa's mother house. And today to go by the red light district, before going to the Institute for Management, to see how the poorest of the poor still yet live. I've been able to see the greatness of India and its contradictions. I see so much of its greatness in Britain and in France, in the UK, in the US, and in the highly technical fields. The high-tech capital of the world now is India. The most billionaires in one country is India. Number two in auto manufacturing now is India. Yet with all that brilliance of mind and the growth of these billionaires, the country with the most poor people is India. 1/3 of the nation is in poverty. Somehow, some way, our values must change direction. It's not enough for few and fewer. They have more and more. The more and more must have that which is sustenance for their mere survival. I watched in our religious orders lately how there's so much focus on piety and forms of celebration, and to the point of ecstasy just to call the name of Jesus and what his name means in the raising of hands. Because I'm not sure that we're talking about the Jesus of Galilee. We're talking about the Jesus of Constantine. The question was asked in the Old Testament, how do we worship? How do we worship? Do we give the Lord fatted calves and rams and rivers of oil? The writer of Interception says, no, you can't give God back what already belongs to God. You can't give God some cows and some rams and some oil. You do justice, and you love mercy, and you walk humbly before your God. In one sense, what is to do justice? It is to go learn to do unto others, you would have them do unto you. What is justice? It is your commitment to live as you climb. It's not enough for you to learn to become literate, but to teach literacy. Not enough for to have a job, but to share growth. Jesus of Nazareth, which was asked to speak at St. Paul on the mission of the church. In some sense, it's the mission of the school. Jesus of Nazareth was born a minority, really born under the edict of genocide. He was an untouchable. The high-level church order, they helped send the order to kill him at birth. They would not touch him. He was under Roman occupation. They would not touch him. It really couldn't have been a silent holy night, because all the babies were being killed in search of him, a night of genocide. And his parents took him as a refugee, took him to Egypt. And there was a big debate about who his father was, born in the midst of calamity and a sense of marginalization. And yet from that 12 years in Egypt, Africa, he came back and sat with wise men in the temple. And then he emerged again at 30. He says, I've come in a sense to do a mega church mission. Not looking for a temple to be the rabbi over, to be the pastor. I've been anointed to preach the gospel, something very different now. Not to give so much tithes and alms to the big house of worship, not certainly to bow to Rome. I've been anointed to preach the gospel. Good news to the poor, the red light district. Good news to the mother house. Good news to those whose backs are against the wall. Good news to those who've given up on life and who stopped dreaming. Good news to those who've adjusted to a condition of deprivation. Good news to those who feel that they cannot go any further. Heal the sick. Heal the brokenhearted. Defend the poor. Deliver the needy, and set at freedom those who are held captive, and this is the acceptable year of the Lord. And then he says, how shall I measure you? I was hungry, and you fed me, or you didn't. I was naked, and you clothed me, or you didn't. I was a political prisoner, and you visited me, or you didn't. Here you hear no call for piety as a call for justice, a call for decency, a call to lift up those whose backs are against the wall. And forever trying to understand why people are the way people are. We see a woman on the street who have been raped, who have chosen to become a prostitute to make money, and we look upon them with a sense of disgust and shame, and we distance ourselves. And yet he was the embracer. I see him walking down the street on one occasion, Mr. Chairman, and he heard this woman screaming. And every time a rock would hit her, she would scream a little louder. He shows up in my mind's eye. And the guy said, Jesus, why are you here? You don't know this woman? And you don't know what we caught her doing. And she has broken the civil law, and she's broken the religious law. She's a prostitute. She's been selling sex. We caught her in the act. Jesus said, well, wait, if you caught her in the act of sex, she couldn't have had sex by herself. Where's her partner? If you caught her as a prostitute, where's her partner? Matter of fact, if there are any among you who've not had sex with her, which you could have tried to, throw a rock, and no rocks moved. And as they left one by one, he said to her, now you sin no more. You sell your body no more, and you go in peace. What made him care so much about the depth of this woman's pain and her sin of being a prostitute? Because he knew she was not born that way. She was born in her innocence. Maybe she saw some act much too early, sex between adults, and took away her innocence. Maybe in her poverty and desperation, she tried to use her body to make some money. Maybe it was a cultural thing to do for girls 13, 14, 15. Not quite sure what drove her off the moral center to prostitution, but he did because he cared. And that goes to the point of education and what our values. People want to know, people care that you know. They really care. I went to Horizon School. I went to the Institute for Management. I went to the University of India. I went to Harvard. I went to Princeton. I went to Yale. I went to Northwestern or UCLA. People really hear that. People care that you know. But they care more that you care. It's important for them to care that you know, to know that you care, because caring matters. And I think those are the values I gather from this school, that people here are being taught to care, to work for less but to gain more in the meantime. Your job is to sow seeds, and you can never tell when the seeds will multiply into fruit, except if you sow them in time, enough will germinate to bring about a new India. You have been blessed to be a great country, independent country. In the new world, we left Chicago the other day and got to Delhi nonstop in a little over 13 hours. Nonstop, New York to Hawaii is about the same length of time, about 12 to 13 hours. Senegal to New York to Senegal, about 6.5 hours. New York to LA, about 6.5 hours. Our roads have been dwarfed by distance and time. We have a new advanced sense of technology. We can sit here right now and pinpoint our enemies, quote unquote, 1,000 miles away and drop a drone on them at a bus stop. Our technology is superior, but our moral values, our priorities are not as they ought to be. In this country, there are too many hungry people. There are too many malnourished people, and we can do something about it. It's not beyond our capacity. Is it beyond our dream? And that becomes, we hear so much about unity. The Bible does not speak so much about unity as it does about vision. Because if all of us were blind in the room, a one-eyed person would be in charge. It is not that we're unified in our blindness, but somebody sees. We're driven by, without vision, the people perish. Can you imagine no hunger in India? Can you see it? Can you see that there are no more people called untouchable? I mean, can you see that every child is literate and every parent has a job and all have a house? Can you see the filthy rivers dredged with flowing water where there are fish swimming and there are fishermen on the banks and there are children swimming and playing? Can you see the new heaven and the new earth and the old one pass away? If you can't see it, you can't have it. But if you can see it, you can have it. There is no reason why we cannot achieve in our lifetime a nation without hunger, a nation without disease, where all of our children can learn to read and write and count and think. One thing worse than slavery. Slavery is a pretty bad system. One thing worse than slavery is to adjust to it. Another thing is to rationalize it really doesn't matter after all, because at least it's better to be a slave than to be dead. Somehow, it's better that you be I would rather I'd rather die and be in my grave than be a slave. There are some values that challenges life itself. Some values that challenges life itself, and we are on that brink today. I want to say this in closing, that in the coming years, I reflect on these 3 days here in Calcutta. I see the pain, but I also see the possibilities. Suffering breeds character. Character breeds faith. In the end, faith will not disappoint. I saw something I had not seen since I saw it in South Africa in 1979. There, just behind the church in Soweto, the Mandela was still in jail, and you still had to have passbooks to walk up and down the streets of South Africa. You couldn't be out at night after 10 o'clock, and blacks were untouchables. They had to go across the street and they saw white people coming. All of the degradation that went with that. I saw a little place called Crossroads, children in the mud, and it was a kind of rainy night with a cardboard up on a tree, writing their letters, writing in their own language, not writing in Afrikaner. And then they would do the toy. I see anybody willing to sit down on a bench that they made and write letters in the mud cannot be held back. When I see the number of entrepreneurs in India, every other little slum shack is selling some corn, or selling some apples, or selling some watermelon. That there's a sense of here that you will not die. You will not go away. But somehow your mission is not over. Your mission is not over until we wipe out the killer, poverty. It's not enough to be free from Britain. We must also be free from want and free from fear. After all, terror instills fear. And terror is, I'm afraid my child might not live to 5. That's terror. I'm afraid my child might grow up and not have a life of literacy. That's terror. I'm afraid if my child is sick, they can't get medical care. That's terror. We must go beyond that terror and fulfill the calling to do justice and love mercy and walk humbly before God. And in our own struggle back home, we're at the same stage. This is not in the degree of righteousness. It's just that it's somewhat analytical. We went through our stages, 246 years of slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow, and went through beyond that. We went through another year trying to get the right to vote. Now we're trying to fight for access to capital, industry, and technology. But I submit to you today, in this place, leave this place teaching the power of learning, the power of caring, the power of lifting up. And I think what strikes me about the Young Horizons is the idea that you can be a minority with majority vision. You can be a poor person with a rich vision. You can be a minority with majority vision. That's kind of what made Moses different. He was a minority, but he had a majority vision. Gandhi in South Africa was a minority with a majority and a global vision. Dr. King was a minority with a global vision. It's not enough to free Indians. We must free the world. If you are in a house and one night you hear the alarm going off and you look up and you see the fire trucks on television, breaking news, and you're next door, you're not safe until your neighbor is safe. You cannot save your room until you save the house. You cannot save your room until you save. We live in one rural house. And that is some sense why I'm glad to be a part of this family today. There are no more foreigners in this world. Whatever affects one of us directly affects the rest of us indirectly. And you believe in yourself. Young women, let nothing break your spirit. Don't let anything stop your vision. Young men, stand up and be tall. You've come so far. Mr. Gandhi and Mother Rita did so much for so little. You have more to work with. And no matter what your background is, what your circumstance may have been, strong minds still break strong chains. No matter what your background may be, I submit to you today that if your mind can conceive it and your heart can believe it, you can achieve it. that through it all, your mind is like a pearl. You can do anything in the world if your mind, there's nothing stronger than a made-up mind. So make up your mind. Stand tall, stand for justice, and do justice, and love mercy, and walk humbly before God. Thank you. God bless you very much. Thank you. I see somebody saying, we have to catch a plane there and go to Delhi tonight and on to Chicago tomorrow night and be blessed to go back to some ice in Chicago. Do let me say, those of you who Twitter, by the way, while I'm waiting to raise your hand, you Twitter, by the way, you can do at Revd Jesse Jackson a hashtag push and push India with the hashtag. That's it, right? Push India hashtag on our Twitter at Revd Jesse Jackson. And so I want us to remain in touch because we're coming back to Calcutta. We are with or without, and we're coming back to Calcutta. Let me try to answer a question or two real fast before we dash out. I couldn't miss this moment. A question or two real quickly. Did you fall asleep? Yes, sir.
So you said that we are free from untouchables, but in India, I assure you that I work in Bihar, part of North Bihar, where the untouchable still exist, and there are a community called Dalit and Mahadalit who have been totally isolated. So we are still passing that liberation period.
Well, you know, I listened to the doctor mention there'll be elections pretty soon. We live in two different systems. We live in a political democracy and economic free enterprise. And so it's not enough to democratize the politics, but it's also democratize the economy. You can keep voting and keep recycling poverty or recycling deprivation. We must not democratize our economy. We've globalized technology. We've globalized capital, but we've not globalized human rights. We've not globalized workers' rights. We've not globalized women's rights. We've not globalized environmental security. And our work is not complete until we have that sense of globalization and humane values. I was saying earlier today that when you play what you call soccer, at home we call football, what makes the game so intriguing, the reason it becomes so fascinating is that you do not know what the outcome will be. And your hero may be an untouchable. Your hero may be somebody with a so-called royal blood. The fact of the matter is, you just don't know because on the field of play there are no inheritance points. What makes the game so intriguing is that the playing field is even. Repeat, say whenever. Hello, say whenever. The playing field. Real louder. Whenever the playing field is even and the rules are public and the goals, the referees are fair and the score is transparent, we can make it. Hear that. Whenever, and that's the struggle about access to education and health care and a house. We are fighting to even the playing field. We really want merit to conquer inheritance. We really want to even the playing field. Let me express my sincere thanks to you and to my chairman. Chairman, please stand again. Please, for me, please don't do that to me. Stand up, please. Give him a real big hand. He's done a great job. I'm here today on the power of his invitation, his prayers, and his special kind of commitment to educate all of you. God bless you. Love you very much.
so much. A warm hand for Revd Jackson.
Land ahoy! By Jove, it's a gateway to the Spice Lands. Now 1601, the British East India Trading Company, commanded by Sir James Lancaster, arrived on the shores of India for the first time with the innocuous purpose of seeking a gateway to the Spice Lands. India in those days was not a name, it was just a concept. There were no political or civil bindings to which the people were subjected. A decadent system of aristocracy prevailed all over the country. The people were committed to various monarchs, each of whom were busy trying to subdue their opponents and annexing each other's land to what they had marked as their own. So whether it was the French, the Dutch, or the British who gradually headed into the country, the monarchs and their subordinates were busy with their own inert agenda, oblivious to the designs of the foreigners. All in all, the people of this subcontinent, referred to as the Indies, had no idea of unity. There weren't any messiahs either to save them from the onslaught of misery in the garb of commercial transactions. The British, who had come in as mere traders, took advantage of this internal turbulence. A bold step taken by them was to pacify the religious sentiments of the Indians, but discreetly kept the impasse between the Hindus and Muslims in particular still going strong. Their trump card was Christianity. By and by, the not-so-staunch Indians understood the values of Christianity as a means of restoring their pride and giving them a place of recognition in the society. From this stage, the British slowly but surely strengthened their ground. It took the Indians almost 3 centuries to realize that their pride was not being restored but systematically decimated. The writing was clear on the wall. The British had to go. India rose to the call of Mahatma Gandhi, a silent but dogged Indian leader who opposed the British in a very special way. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi convinced fellow Indians that non-cooperation with the British was the only weapon that could be used successfully to turn them out. He appealed to the masses to fight for their rights as citizens of India. Along with Gandhiji, another persistent believer in the need to avail of and consequently respect one's civil rights was Rabindranath Tagore. Indians realized that the British must not be allowed to hold center stage any longer, since India belonged only to the Indians. There was no time to lick their wounds, but to heal them as expediently as possible.
Sani da ba ma ga re ga.
খরবায়ু বয়ে মেঘে চারিদিক ছায় মেঘে উগুনে নাও খানি পাইও তুমি কষে ধরো হাত আমি তুলে বাঁধি পার হাই মারা বারো টান হাইও 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 খরবায়ু বয়ে বেগে চারিদিক ছায় মেঘে উগুনে নাও খানি পাইও
Sani da ba ma ga re ga. Sani da ba ma ga re ga. Pa da ni sa sa re da. Pa da ni sa re re da. Ga 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 ma ga. Ga 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 re ni re pa ma ga. Ga re sa ni sa re. Sa ni da ba sa.
শৃঙ্খলে বারবার ঝনঝন ঝঙ্কার নয় তো তরুণীর ক্রন্দন সংকার বন্ধন দুর্বার সহ্য না হয় আর টলমল করে আছে তাইও হাই মারা মারে টান হাইও 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 খরবায়ু বয়ে বেগে চারিদিক ছায় মেঘে উগুনে নাও খানি পাইও
Re 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 na na re na re 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 na re re na re re na na re 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 na re na re 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 na 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 re re na 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 ra na re 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 na re 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 na re 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 na
গুনি গুনি দিন ক্ষণ চঞ্চল করি মন বলো না যাই কি নাই যাই রে সংশয় পারাবার অন্তরে হবে বার সংশয় পারাবার অন্তরে হবে বার উদ্বেগে তাকায়ও না বাইরে যদি মাতে মহাকাল উত্তম জটা জাল ঝড়ে হয় লুণ্ঠিত ঢেউ ওঠে উত্তাল ভয়ানক কুণ্ঠিত তালে তার দিও তাল জয় 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 গান গাইও হাই মারা মারা টান হাইও 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 বয়ে বেগে চারিদিক ছায় মেঘে উড়ে নাও খানি বাইও তুমি কষে ধরো হাত আমি তুলে বাঁধি পাল তুমি কষে ধরো হাত আমি তুলে বাঁধি পাল হাই মারো মারো টান হাইও 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 খরবায়ু বয়ে বেগে চারিদিক ছায় মেঘে বলে নাও খানি বাই
Sani da ba ma ga re ga. Sani da ba ma ga re ga pa ma 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 da ba ma re ga 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 ma ga ga Sani da ba ma ga.
Poe was inspired by Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland when he wrote Tasher Desh. It is a satirical portrayal of a society ruled by strict conventions, and it is a veiled criticism of the British Raj. The storyline revolves around a prince who, tired of the suffocating surroundings of his palace, goes in search of adventure. The prince knows precious little about the world outside, but he is accompanied by a far more accomplished traveling companion, a merchant. The mismatched pair gets shipwrecked in Tasher Desh, or the land of cards. The inhabitants of this place are all playing cards who follow strict rules and regulations and are devoid of emotions. The prince is bewildered by the lack of feelings in the people of this land, and he tries hard to effect change in the cards, and gradually their human qualities begin to emerge. Needless to say, the people of Tasher Desh are the misdirected Indians, and the prince is the leader who will deliver them from the evil of slavery. Anything new is met with a question, perhaps even protest. There is strangeness about novelty, and Tagore explains this to perfection.
আমরা নূতন যৌবনেরই দূত.
Also from Tasher Desh, the song accompanied by dance is a message to the British that we are the young India, bursting with a vitality that had been dormant for so many long years of British rule.
আমরা নূতন যৌবনেরই দূত. আমরা চঞ্চল, আমরা অদ্ভুত. আমরা নূতন যৌবনেরই দূত. আমরা বেড়া ভাঙি, আমরা অশোক বনের রাঙানি সায়রাঙি, ঝঞ্ঝারো বন্ধন ছিন্ন করে দি. আমরা বিদ্যুৎ, আমরা চঞ্চল, আমরা অদ্ভুত. আমরা নূতন যৌবনের দূত. আমরা করি ভুল অগাধ জলে, ঝাঁপ দিয়ে জুঝিয়ে পাই কুল. আমরা করি ভুল যেখানে ডাক পড়ে, জীবন মরণ ঝড়ে. যেখানে ডাক পড়ে, জীবন মরণ ঝড়ে. আমরা প্রস্তুত, আমরা চঞ্চল, আমরা অদ্ভুত. আমরা নূতন যৌবনের দূত.
The turn of the century, early days of the 1900s. India was now burning with the urge to destroy all the shackles that symbolize the shattering of their self-esteem. After all, how could the pride of being Indian wake up without destroying the haughty condescension of the British?
ঝড়ে হাওয়া বজ্র শিখায় এক পলকে মিলিয়ে দিলে সাদা কালো আগুন জ্বালো আগুন জ্বালো ব্যর্থ প্রাণীর আবর্জনা পুড়িয়ে ফেলে আগুন জ্বালো আগুন জ্বালো।
What did Tagore want from his fellow countrymen? He wanted each and every Indian to fearlessly raise his head, and this would be only possible if the spirit of brotherhood, irrespective of caste and creed, was the guiding light behind every thought and action.
Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action. Into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake.
Tagore wanted his countrymen to awake, but he did not wish to force anyone. To be a patriot, one has to feel the fervor from within. Tagore's superb creation,
যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে।
if people shy away from what you have to say and despise you for breaking the line of acceptance, you do deserve sympathy, but you cannot pull the brakes on your beliefs. If you know for a fact that you are right, then all you need to do is open your heart and soul and prove to the world the confidence you have in yourself is not at all unfounded. You have the right to speak out and protect yourself. Please do so. Inspired by their leaders, Indians felt the irresistible urge to get together as a people, as a nation. The need of the hour was to join hands and fight for their identity.
We come to the end of this evening's program. Ladies and gentlemen, from all of us from Young Horizons School, thank you for coming and being a part of our 40-year celebration. Thank you, good night, have a safe journey home.